Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to another awesome edition of the Best Practices Show podcast. Our goal with this podcast is to give you great advice or great thinking to help you create a better practice and a better life. And today I've got an amazing coach on. Her name is Heather Crockett. And we're going to share with you how to kickstart your best year yet, the ultimate guide to getting started. And yes, we are at the halfway point in 2024. So we're going to give you a framework on how to start thinking better about the end of this year and all of next year. So make sure you guys listen up. I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show podcast. Are you wondering, how do I really kickstart my best year ever? Half of the year is over. What do I need to do? How do I evaluate? Time is the new rich. And a lot of the work that we do with the people we coach is to help them see their time better, use it better. And today we're going to give you the ultimate guide to getting started with an amazing coach here. Her name is Heather Crockett. Heather, thank you so much for being on. I always appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thanks for having me back again, Kirk.
Again and again and again. Now, I say this all the time. People are like, what do you guys do? If you don't know by now, we're practice coaches. So these are conversations we have all the time with the people we coach. Now, the practices we coach aren't necessarily broken. A lot of them are actually amazing practices, and our job is to help them think better. And we're going to do this on this podcast with you today to give you a little example of some of the things that we do to help you really kickstart your best year ever. Now, Heather, give us the why on this.
So the why is, in dentistry, we operate in a 6-month world. So we always need to be planning and looking ahead. It's 6 months away. You can't change your schedule. It's not as easy to change your schedule when you've already got it booked up 6 months out. So if you don't plan, then things will just happen to you. If you plan ahead and you're intentional with it, then you really can have and look forward to the best year yet.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that you, maybe, if you're a dentist listening to this, one of the reasons you became a dentist was you had the ability to have this thing called freedom of choice on where you practice, how long you practice, days that you practice. And you want to make sure that you hold that high. And this podcast is potentially airing right around the 6-month window previous to the next year, which is 2025. And I was telling Heather before we hit the go button, this is an important conversation in the Behrendt household. I have a daughter who's going to be graduating from college next year. It's 1 year from, we're shooting this in May. Actually, we're shooting on May 28th. Now, I just got all the information. The hotels are sold out already within 10 miles of Madison, Wisconsin. So now I'm scrambling to find, I'm like, it's a year from now. And yet that's how life works. I have a son that plays club baseball, and it's a fluid life. Now, you can't go to every single thing, but the question you have to ask yourself is what's most important. And the cool thing about dentistry is once you start to plan like this, like Heather said, you have a 6-month window. Actually, we will start with a bigger window, which is a year, then go to 6 months, and then you go to quarters. And what's really cool, if you know how many days you're working, you know what your gross production per day needs to be, you've got your gaps tightened up, you can actually predict profitability at a very high level. We have this thing called snow here in Wisconsin. So that throws a little bit of a wrench in it. And you never want to be like just working and coming up for air. And I'll say it again and again and again, like time is the new rich. So your time element is the most important piece of this. Now, Heather, can you break this down? Let's talk about how we do this.
Yes. So Kirk, you often say, how many days are you working this year? And how many dentists really truly know that number? Not very many. When you come across people, I know in your speaking gigs, you've spoke to this before, that so many don't like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many days my office is open. I'm not sure how many days I am working this year. This is a key number. It's so important to know how many days you are working. Kirk, can you
Yeah.
speak to that?
I totally can speak to that. It's one of my favorite questions to ask any dentist. So if you're listening to this, I'm going to ask you the question. How many days do you work per year? Yeah, I would say probably 95% or higher of the dentists I ask that question to, they don't know the answer. They're just working. And they usually say, I'll ask them, well, how many days do you work? They go 4 days a week. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm asking. How many days did you work last year or this year? And so it can't just be, more. It's got to be less. Now, according to the ADA and the Health Policy Institute, you guys have heard us share this before, the average dentist that owns their own practice works 220 days a year. That's a lot. That's too much. And that's up from 209 days a year. So I think the mark of a true professional is going from that many days, if that's where you're starting, to less days. So let's say you're at 220. Don't stay there. Go to 210, then to 200, then to 190, then to 180. That's when it becomes fun. And you can start to control those days when they happen, all of that. So knowing the number of days that you want to give, I'm going to say one more thing about the number of days. There's a lot of talk about burnout. And while we're not experts on burnout, I do listen to a lot of these people who are experts on it. And they talk about keeping work in a container, whether it be during the day or during the week. This is where you can look at work in a container for the year. This is how many days I'm going to give per month. I'm going to go on vacation with my family in March, so I'm not going to be working the regular number of days that I normally would work during the month of March. And so there's got to be some countermeasures to this. So at the end of the day, here's the advice is like, know the number, then see how you can lessen the number and still make more if that's your goal. Right, Heather?
Yes. And Kirk, I want to point out something that you said is that there's a reason you became a dentist. And one of those reasons is probably because you can control your own life. If you own your own practice, then you have control. I tell my clients this all the time. You are the one that controls your schedule. You are the one that controls and says whether your office is open or not. You are the one that controls when you are there and when you're not there. That is key and so important. You could let your schedule overrun you, or you could run your schedule. So it's important to keep that top of mind and know your number. You've got to know your number.
You used a magic word there. It's called control. Now, I'm a control freak and I like control. I like control on hours. I like control on fees. I like control. And you probably do too if you're listening to this. So the more control you have, which means you choose your hours, your days, your fees, the happier you are. If you have a little control on the hours, your fees, what insurance will reimburse, that becomes not fun. Now, I don't want to leave you there. The whole idea we're doing this is that you know the number first. Actually, I would say knowing the number first is the first step to making it better. You'll be shocked when you actually look. Now, people always ask me, well, I don't really work on Fridays, but I did a case on a Friday. If you go to the office and you're seeing a patient at all on any level, even if that's a work day. So you could argue with me, but you went to work to see a patient. And so people like to argue, but that's okay. That's just our definition. So step number one, just know the day and then ask yourself, are you okay with that? And then we can move to the next step. So what's step number two, Heather?
Okay. So if you don't know your day, find your amount, make sure that you know that number and that you're working towards lessening it. Now I want you to pull out your calendar for 2025, start with a full annual calendar. And now you're going to start with your big picture vision. Let's say you are scheduled to work 220 days this year and you want to work less, great. But let's make sure that the information that we put into our calendar for 2025 is the stuff that we want to be a part of. So what's necessary for me to be at? Let's pull out, if you have any children, look at the school calendars. My kids, I have 2 school calendars that I have to look at and piece together with my own work calendar. So that is crucial. So many schools, I know, Kirk, you've mentioned that your kids do a couple of years in advance. So do mine. So the district is great. I think they have to put it out to a certain degree. So pull those up and popping some dates into your calendar. Spring break, your summer vacation, fall break, the weird holidays that my kids take off, the mental wellness days, things like that I want to be a part of. And then you've got to take into consideration that Christmas break. Just next year, I think this upcoming year, it's a full 2 weeks. Isn't it good to know that ahead of time? And the further ahead you know, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go off the rails on this one. So my kids all go to a public school, or did go to a public school, and I have one left in public school. The public school system that my kids go to, the calendar is produced 3 years in advance. So we can make an argument. I know where my kids are going to be at for the next 3 years. Now, when your kids are little, and when our kids were little, spring break was super important. So now if you're listening to this podcast and it's July, think about this. You do what Heather's talking about. You've got March all booked. You can start to pre-book airfare that's affordable for the Saturday you want to get out of town. And especially if you live in Wisconsin, everybody is on that flight on that Saturday, and ticket prices are sky high. You can actually show your family, no, I've sequestered these days and that's when I'm going to go. So that's really, really important. You mentioned CE, the best CE in the world now. Some of them, and you know which ones they are, have a 2-year wait before you can even get into the next class. And so now you can make an argument, I'm just going to put that on the schedule. When you put it on the schedule, it's more likely to happen. Dr. Peter Dawson is one of the people that was instrumental for me at the age of 27, just said, listen, you're going to figure out what you're going to be doing for the rest of next year. And I thought that was silly. He used to call it blue time. And he would always say that the best moments of your life never happen at work. They happen when you're away from work. You'll have some good moments at work, but not the best moments. And so pre-planning this, most dentists actually do a pretty good job of pre-planning. They do more planning on their vacations than they do their own practices. So I'm not talking about something that's really foreign here. So you can definitely do that. So it's really important to have those dates scheduled out far, because nothing makes you happier than giving yourself permission to those moments that matter. Now, I've said this a couple of times, but this is my thread for the month. I heard somebody say this, and I wish I could remember who said it. But they say when you get older, you start to think about things too much. And one of them is regret. You think about time, and the advice was take care of the moments and then the years take care of themselves. And I really like that, because you don't need to get everything perfect. All you got to do is take care of the moments. So think about that. Take care of the moments and then the years take care of themselves. So I'm 54 as you're listening to this. I hope I can do a good enough job of just taking care of these micro moments that matter, that I look back and go, no, that was good. It was good. There's no regret behind us. And that's what we really want you to do with this podcast. And remember this, you make the rules. So this is a great opportunity to take a look at your time and start with next year's calendar.
I'd agree completely. We're all about better practice, better life here. And this totally plays into that. Better practice, get your CE in, get it on your calendar. Better life, talk about when you're going to spend time with your family, when you're going to spend time with your friends, and intentional. It feels different to me when I'm taking a day off, when I'm supposed to be at work, or when the office is supposed to be open versus a long weekend. It feels different in a good way, a way that's like, this is intentional time away. Because then when you come back, you're going to show up better and different for the team and the people around you.
Yeah, totally. And I didn't plan to mention, but you really, if you own a dental practice, you should be able to take away 1 week per quarter. Start with that. So you should be able to take 4 full weeks and get away. You can run your dental practice on 48 weeks a year. If you can't, there's something wrong with it. Then you get better at it. And you're like, okay, I'm going to go to 46 weeks that I'm going to work. And you could work backward. And I know we're going to be talking about working backwards in that respect, but that's when it becomes fun. Now, one more thing, because I'm doing this right now, I'm working on vacations next year. A lot of these VRBOs that you want to go to, they require a hefty deposit and the cancellation fee is not easy. So desirable places, desirable hotels are now putting tighter restrictions on these rooms, like the graduation weekend. You cannot cancel. You can't. Like, you're going to pay, I have to pay full fee for the entire weekend right now. And if you cancel, you're out. Now, that works both ways. You might be thinking, well, that's a lot of money. Yeah, well, I'm going to be there. So it's a double loss if I don't, or triple loss, however you want to say it. So again, I mean, this is what's so cool about this profession. And I'll just add one more thought, because I love what you're saying, Heather. When you're working on any level on a day that you're not supposed to, you're building something called resentment. You actually resent getting back to a patient. You resent looking at a lab case. You resent it. And that's when work starts to bleed into our personal lives. Now, there are times you just got to get it done. But when when the exception becomes the rule, that's when it's not fun. So,
yes, and very unhealthy there for sure. And something else that Kirk, you've said, I can't remember who you heard it from, but dentists are athletes and we need to spend some time recovering. So I love the idea of 1 week per quarter because that piece of it can be considered your recovery time.
yeah. And you're so right. I mean, this is not a job where you go and punch a few keys on a keyboard and, you're giving exponential stress, and it's bigger stress the more you care. So words shade, shape, translucency, margin, those mean a lot of things to you if you care about dentistry and you take a lot of CE, because a crown is not just a crown. And Heather, what you're talking about is you need recovery. Recovery is not a reward for success. It's a requirement for success. So you got to get away from your practice 1 week a quarter at least, and then go to 2 weeks a quarter, because you'll come back stronger. You look at the best athletes in the world, they build recovery into their schedules. And one more thing I'll say about recovery is if I'm one of the team members that works for you, I need you to go away for a week, please, so that I can like you more when you come back, because you're an entrepreneur. You don't think like us. We actually need to take a breath when you go away. And I say this all the time, but Angela put a meme on our group chat, our work, our internal group chat, that said that there's no vacation like when your boss takes a vacation. I was like, hey, what does that mean? She's like, oh my gosh, it's kind of nice when you go away. So there's so many benefits for you to go away if you're the dentist.
Yes, it's intentional investment in you. And if you don't have your glass full, then you have nothing to give to your team and to your patients and your family.
Oh, I totally agree. So where do we go next, Heather? What's the next step?
Okay, now that you know your days, now that you have planned out your whole year, now you can start to work backwards. So if I have planned to work 200 days in the year of 2025, now I want you to work backwards in how much does the practice need to produce in order to collect what the practice needs to collect. So if you are aware of your collections percentage, which I highly recommend that you do, your net collections, and you know what that gap is between the collections and your gross production, now you can set a gross production daily goal for how many days the office is open. So if it's 200 days, now you can say, if I want to produce X amount, I just have to divide it by that 200 days. Now, with one caveat though, now life happens. Family members, friends pass away. So you have to prepare for the worst, or you get sick or you get injured. I always coach my clients to at least put in 5 to 8 days of buffer. So instead of setting your production goal for that 200 days, you're going to set it for 192 days, because then you give yourself that buffer. Hopefully you won't have to use it, but if you do, it's there, and that there's that peace of mind.
Yeah, I totally agree on giving yourself the buffer. And you could even think about it. I mean, I know some of you like to go granular with this. So when you get your gross production per day, you're also thinking about the hourly. And I see some dentists doing hourly with 8 hours. I'm like, you should never do 8 hours, because you're not going to be producing all 8 hours. There's going to be 2 hours where you might be doing a check or whatever. So as you go a little bit more granular with this, you're going to want to budget for 5 or 6 hours, depending on who you are, because you just don't know what's going to come into your schedule in that respect. And so it becomes a really easy game to understand your gross production per day times the number of days. And now you can become singularly focused on how do we improve our practice. Now, ultimately, we want your gross production, your net production be as close as possible. If you're writing off 33%, you got to factor that in too. And my encouragement to you is to tighten those gaps up. So what it really becomes fun when it becomes predictable. And what we're laying out here is a predictable formula that you can do and you can use so that your weeks get better, your months get better, and your years get better. Anything else you would add just about the formula and these steps?
I love what you just said there with the predictability piece. Your life gets better, your practice gets better, the team it's a sigh of relief. Too often have you gone to the office like stressed that you may not be producing anything that day, stressed because you don't have enough money coming into the bank that month. And it's all because we didn't set a plan to begin with. So set the plan, and then it will be and become more predictable. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. I've actually watched many dentists treatment plan a case for 1 and 2 hours, like a group of, I don't know that I've ever watched a dentist plan their next year for 1 or 2 hours, And I get it. Sometimes it's painful. It's too much to think about. But when you sit down and you really take the intention that you would with some of your most difficult cases and approached your life this way, you would find that your life turns out like these cases do. They ultimately reach the outcome that you're looking to achieve. So,
yes. And I would ask, ask all of our listeners, like, do you want a better year next year than you're having this year? Or than from last year? And if you keep chasing a number and you're not quite certain what that is, like, why would you not sit down and plan your year?
Yeah, totally agree. And so you don't need to make it perfect. Every year just has to get a little bit better. And with the outline and the structure that we've laid out here, you can do this. And you ultimately become the dentist that a lot of young dental students or pre-dent students come to you and go, should I be a dentist? You go, absolutely. Let me tell you why. Because you can pre-plan your life and you can pick all of these variables. So I hope this has been helpful. Any last thoughts you have, Heather, before we say goodbye to everybody else?
Yes, I highly encourage you to set aside some time, some intentional carved out time, 1 or 2 hours, like you've said before, like go to a coffee shop, or make sure it's when the kids aren't home or when you're able to sit down and focus and look at how many days did you work last year? How many days are you working this year? How many days would you like to work next year? What does your vacation time look like? What does your CE time look like? And really, like you said, just as if you were going to treatment plan something for a patient, your recommended diagnosed treatment for a patient, now let's diagnose your 2025. What does that look like? What's the treatment plan? And really dig in to the details. You can get fancy with color coding if you want. I love colors myself. You mentioned blue time. If you make all of your vacations and your family time blue time, it will mean something different to you. And it will definitely trigger an emotional response. Like, that is the time that I am spending on my better life. And it's going to be so amazing. And I want to hear all about it. So if you saw success with that, I would love to hear from you. Email me at heather@actdental.com and just tell me what your days are. I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree. I think once you get this done, put it everywhere. Put it on the wall, in your break room, put it up if you have a home office, put it on the refrigerator. So in the Behrendt household, we've got all the calendars up there, whether they be the football fall or volleyball fall or where we're going. And I think it makes a statement. Andy, who's in the room next to me, he's got his big calendar up there. I love watching what he's up to. If he's always picking a cool place and you can see he's got it marked out. He's like, no, I'm going away, going to the Caribbean. So I'm like, good for you. It tells a great story. You tell yourself a great story and people know what to expect from you year after year. So Heather, thank you so much for being on. I love this stuff.
Thanks so much for having me, Kirk. You're the best.
No, you're the best. So stick around while we say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for listening to the Best Practices Show podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed today, which I hope you did, please share this with your friends. Keep sending us suggestions for things that you guys want to see, and we're going to keep lining up so that you guys can listen to this information, consume it, and create a better practice and a better life. So until we see you guys next time, or you hear from us next time, keep watching or keep listening to the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy your day.